After 24 rounds, Lando Norris is the Formula One World Champion.
Hello and welcome. This is the very first episode of the Big Points F1 Sweepstake podcast, our pilot episode, if you will. It's Tom Midler here in the studio with Sam Gould and Jonny Sam. Boy, have we got a thrilling F1 season finale to talk about. It's just the three of us on the pod, obviously on the panel today, but the aim is that throughout the season, throughout next season, we'll be getting more people on. We'll get a little snapshot of everyone throughout the group because we've got such an international group of people and we want to get their F1 opinions, get their thoughts on the sort of season as it unfolds as well. But for today, we've got a season to look back upon because obviously Abu Dhabi's just happened. The season has concluded. We had this final block of three races. We had Vegas, we had Qatar, and we had Abu Dhabi. So I think let's briefly kick this off by going back to Las Vegas. Anyone want to take the floor and chip in a little bit about the Vegas Grand Prix?
I think European time, was it 5 o'clock in the morning? Nice early alarms. The wife wasn't particularly pleased, but F1 takes preference and priority sometimes. But no, I think from the beginning to the end, I think Lando Norris nearly made it more dramatic than it really needed to be. I think especially if I remember correctly at the beginning, that start, it was Las Vegas when he kind of chopped across Max Verstappen, wasn't it? And then missed a braking point, I guess, into the first corner, and then lost a couple of places. And then I think I remember it was pretty uneventful. I'm not a massive fan of Las Vegas circuit myself. I understand all the grandeur around Las Vegas and the reason for having it. Growing the American market as well, of course, adding another race to America. But I think overall it was a relatively dull spectacle, right until the end when Norris fell into a few more issues and nearly made the championship even more interesting than it had built up to be until then.
Yeah, I guess from my side looking back to Vegas, I mean the thing that really stands out for me in my memory is just those practice and quali sessions in absolutely appalling weather, which you just wouldn't expect from being in the middle of the desert. But I think that really highlighted the skill level of these drivers, because for them to be able to drive and keep the not binning it in the wall. I think the only one who did hit the wall was Albon, sort of towards the end of either one of the Q1 or Q2 sessions. I think that was incredibly impressive. But yeah, I think in terms of the race, all the drama came sort of, what was it, an hour and a half after the race, where you're sort of calming down and getting ready to get on with your Sunday. I know I think I was getting the kids some breakfast, and then you just jump on your phone and have a little refresh of Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and all these rumors about them being referred to the stewards, and as soon as you hear the word skidware issue, it was done and dusted for McLaren. So, and just I think especially after Brazil, where Lando was so good, and then he sort of did what he needed to do in Vegas to sort of pretty much sew up the championship and give himself some breathing room. But then the cat was thrown very much back amongst the pigeons. But it made for a really tense final couple of races. So yeah, it was good from that perspective.
It was, yeah. We talked about that. It looked to be pretty much sewn up after Vegas. It was interesting because I think Norris sort of overcooking it at the first corner by chopping off Verstappen. Like that opened the door for Verstappen to get another race win, build a bit more momentum. But it wasn't really the biggest worry at the end of the day. It was a bit of a chance missed for Norris to control the race and sort of really put his stamp on the championship. But second was absolutely fine. And then Norris was struggling again off the podium. And yeah, I had a few people ask me about the whole plank wear thing. It does happen, doesn't it? I think Russell lost his win in Belgium just last year because of plank wear. It's sort of something that crops up like maybe once a season across the grid. It's not always somebody who wins the race or somebody who's so high profile, but it's not, it's very much not unheard of at all. But then for McLaren to do that in a kind of regular race late on in the season, it seemed like a bit of it was a bit of a screw up from McLaren, to be fair. And I thought it was quite interesting that sort of Piastri had to be like, oh yeah, this is terrible as well. Whereas they actually, Piastri having finished off the podium, the fact that McLaren lost all their points, it left Piastri as a net gain in the end. He was closer to the lead of the championship after the points were wiped, although it let Verstappen obviously catch up with McLaren's very very strongly then, like taking all that momentum into Qatar. Funny, I guess the whole of the last 3 races weren't particularly eventful, were they? But when you've got this championship drama going on, there's kind of there's a tension even in the kind of potential of something big happening. But from that, McLaren's kicked out, no points in Vegas, and then Qatar, the strategy mistake. They got they went on the alternate pit call, which was an interesting one. Jonny, have you got any thoughts on McLaren's sort of failure to pit early on under that safety car?
Well, to start with, I think when the strategy is so fixed with this tyre wear, and they had a shelf life of 25 laps, wasn't it? I think. I think that takes a lot out of the spectacle first and foremost. I understand it. There's probably a lot of security reasons for implementing such a ceiling on tyre life, but it kind of boiled down to essentially a toss of a coin, I guess. If you are willing to take the safer route, let's say, and pit, or leave your options open, I guess, as McLaren decided to do. I think what surprised me is that they did it with both cars. I think one of the beauties of F1 with 2 drivers, especially when it comes down to the strategy, is that you can afford to kind of mix it up. But I guess we can't really put ourselves into Stella's position at all, with both cars still fighting for the championship at that stage as well. I guess maybe that was part of Papaya rules, this well documented set of rules of engagement. But I think it's easy to say of hindsight when 2 out of the whole grid don't pit, and eventually it comes back to bite them. I saw the logic behind keeping strategy open with safety cars, a potential, of course, in Qatar. But it just made for a more exciting Abu Dhabi and finale as well.
Talking of Papaya rules, though, do you reckon McLaren sort of tensed up on what was a fairly straightforward call because they didn't want to accidentally prioritise one or the other? You know, if they played both strategies, whoever gets the best one then is getting a massive sort of leg up towards the title in a way. Is that a kind of shortcoming of McLaren? Do you reckon they sort of didn't seize that moment? And maybe we've seen from the best teams in recent years, like Mercedes at their pomp, Red Bull at their best, like they just seem to nail those strategy calls in the most critical of moments. Like they hardly made any mistakes. They seem to just know exactly what to do. Easier when you've got a clear lead car, but did McLaren kind of sort of fumble that one, maybe by getting a bit tense? Would that have happened if this was race 5 of the season and not race kind of penultimate weekend?
Yeah, I think that might have very well played a part in it. I think one of the reasons I think that I heard they were worried about Oscar and Lando having to double stack and on that lap 7, but it was still a huge bungle. I mean, Stella said afterwards they weren't expecting everybody to pit, and but when the safety car is on lap 7 and you've got 2 tire windows of 25 plus or whatever it was plus a 7 lap, it was absolutely perfect opportunity. And perhaps Lando might have lost some time in the double stack, but it's under a safety car, so you're really not losing a huge amount of time, which you can't make up, and you keep your drivers exactly where you want them to be. So I think that Papaya rules maybe came into it a little bit in their thinking, but like I said, it's a split-second decision that you've got to make on that pit wall. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it really didn't for McLaren on this occasion.
I was having sort of shades of Alonso getting stuck behind Petrov at Abu Dhabi in this one when Norris then suddenly, basically, again, all Norris needs is like a comfortable, solid podium, and he's he's still not going to win the title, but he's going to be really, taking a big step towards it in a really comfortable position. Again, Verstappen with all the momentum, lovely, but he was too far back. As long as Norris gets the kind of simple podium that he was never going to miss out on, and then there he is stuck in fifth, can't get past, wasn't able to gain on Antonelli that much, and then the now infamous last lap, Antonelli being overtaken by Norris.
Yeah,
Jonny, what did you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, with all the reactions that happened straight after the race against young Kimi, you have to remember as well, 19 years of age now, of course. There's absolutely no room for that in sport whatsoever. When clear, well, it was a simple driver error. I can't remember correctly, but I think he just lost it in a turn, ran a bit wide and just opened the door. But yeah, it proved the difference in the end, didn't it? Of course, because if it hadn't been for that, I think both Verstappen and Norris been tied, wouldn't they, at the top? So huge point, huge moment. But yeah, I guess it boils down to the pit stop. They shouldn't really been in that position in the first place. I guess with hindsight. I guess what you said about tensing up earlier, just looking from the outside, it perhaps just overthought everything. Just, made things a bit too complex than it should have been. As I think Sam just said, the window between 5 and 7 was kind of the perfect time for 2 sets of 25. I guess. I mean, I'm nowhere near. I would never be anywhere near sitting on a strategist's wall at all, but on a pit wall. But I guess sometimes the most simple strategy is the most effective.
This is what happens, though, isn't it? When you've got Verstappen, like a generational talent, closing you down. I think everyone at McLaren tried to play it down, but they must have known that had they not sealed the driver's title, especially having not won it last year, if they hadn't sealed the driver's title this year, it would have been a massive fumble, really. And then, yeah, you're acting in that environment, like knowing that Verstappen's going to win this race as well. There's all these things going on. They're just perhaps not thinking clearly. And I wonder if that's the kind of thing you see it in a lot of sports. Like when you've won your first title, when you've got over the line, you sort of act a bit differently in the future years. You can act with that self-confidence and maybe make better decisions. But yeah, you're right to mention the kind of abuse as well that was directed the way of Antonelli. Yes, it was a mistake actually that we saw. A lot of drivers made it throughout. I think it happened to Russell on his opening lap. It had happened to Norris maybe on his push lap in qualifying, where they just sort of broke traction on one of those corners. There's so many sort of winding fast corners in Qatar. You break traction, you slide out wide, and it just leaves you helpless for a couple of seconds. Norris took advantage. I think it was important for Norris to get that place as well. I thought so at the time, because you're thinking you're going into like a 3-driver championship finale knowing that third is okay, whereas like if you're going into a 3-driver championship finale knowing that second is what you need, obviously that's still doable, but it is a big difference. Helmut Marko is somebody who's going to come up later in this pod, but I don't think he helped out there, did he? I think GP apologised after his radio message to Max was like, "Oh yeah, Antonelli opened the door for his mate Norris or whatever, Mercedes engine," and then Marko went on TV afterwards, like Marko being sort of like he's one of the only Red Bull people that does interviews without a media handler next to him, sort of giving him a little pinch on the arm, and that's exactly why. But yeah, that brought us down to Abu Dhabi, the third in this sort of non-dramatic / dramatic triple header. Sam, do you want to tell us how you experienced the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix?
Yeah, I mean Abu Dhabi was, I think, overall it was obviously the build up during the week was especially here in the UK with the Sky coverage. It was the decider of the desert, they labelled it here, and it was all over everywhere all week, and rightly so, because it's been a long time since we've had a let alone a 2-driver finale, let alone a 3-driver final race where they all could win it. I found, then there was obviously everyone all week trying to, do all these different permutations of, what if Oscar's here? Will he pull over? Or what happens if, Lando's down in P5 and all this kind of stuff. So that was fun for the week to try and do all those different sort of permutations. But I think once the race got going, especially I think when Oscar got ahead of Lando, that even though Lando was P3 and being pushed by Charles, McLaren really did sort of hold all the cards. Really, I think especially with Max out in front, at the time I think I was a little bit surprised that Red Bull didn't basically try more sort of shithousery, basically, with trying to either back the pack up or try something a little bit different. But I guess this is where it comes into Red Bull not having a competitive second driver really bit them, because Max was very much on his own and there was very little he could do. And obviously Yuki got a little bit of stick for his sort of non-defense against not holding Lando up. Perhaps Red Bull shouldn't have. Well, he tried, yeah, but I think one of Red Bull's mistakes might have been, maybe not telling him that he's sacked that week, because, what was his motivation, really? I mean, he could have got the streets will never forget Yuki moment where, but I think in terms of his future career, I don't think he was ever going to sort of put Lando in the wall or something to help Max. But I think, it was a tense but not super eventful race. But Lando did what he needed to do. He obviously had some pressure from Charles, but he was always really in control of that battle. And I think once Charles's tires started to go, Lando's were so much better, and he was very much in control.
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, with football commitments nowadays, I do tend to miss the 2 o'clock or lunchtime races. I was hoping after I know we get into the sweepstakes stuff later, of course, but after putting my predictions in just before the deadline, actually, went off the football and then was hoping to come back to articles, headlines, hugely dramatic, positions changing throughout the whole of the X amount of laps throughout the race. But having caught up with the action I think on Monday evening, Monday night, yeah, it wasn't the most enthralling, of course. Not that Lando Norris would care, but just to build on what Sam just said about the kind of shithousery. I know not the build-up before the race was around the 2016-esque Lewis Hamilton backing Nico Rosberg back up into Sebastian Vettel, but I do think a lot of the people were forgetting about the track layout and especially the change of the track layout in 2021 or 22, I can't remember which year, which took out a lot of the slower speed corners, a lot of the chicanes, especially, I think, going 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 before the long straight, and then a section towards the back end of the track as well. With all that, and with the tyre selection that McLaren chose, I think it's Piastri on hard and then Norris on mediums. Piastri getting ahead of Norris, as Sam elegantly put it, gave them all the cards in their hands, and I don't think Red Bull really had anywhere to go after that. But any backing up of Oscar Piastri into Norris, then into Charles Leclerc, into George Russell, would have ended up with Piastri overtaking Verstappen and Verstappen missing out any chance he had to take the title. So, yeah, I guess not the most enthralling spectacle. Again, like I said, not that Lando Norris would care, but yeah, all to play for, I guess, next season. I guess we're going to come on to regulation changes, of course, later on. But yeah, a good finale, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, credit must go to Max Verstappen. He won all three of the races that we're talking about here. The first half of the season is very much orange with a little dash of Mercedes kind of turquoise in there in the winners column. And then the second half, another little dash of Mercedes turquoise. And then it's a very blue second half, ultimately. Enough orange in there in the end for Lando Norris to take the title. But what are your thoughts on that? Norris being the champion, the online reaction was essentially, from what I saw online, basically was like everyone saying he's like a mid F1 champion, a boring F1 champion. Like the general consensus on Twitter, not that I trust the Twitter general consensus too much on anything, but the general consensus is that he's like not good enough to be a world champion and is just like an undeserving world champion. Sam, you've got your McLaren jacket on. I'll
Yeah,
hand
yeah,
this question to you
yeah.
first.
No, I think
Before you answer as well,
yeah.
you got to say you've lived in Australia. You're from the UK now. Are you a Piastri fanboy, a Norris fanboy? Are you none of the above? Where do you stand? Before we
No,
hear your opinion.
yeah. I mean, I'm firmly in Lando's camp. I tend to sort of back the British drivers who are on the grid.
British
A bit
bias
of,
on
yeah,
this podcast,
the
people.
classic British bias. Not that I don't have soft spots for other drivers up and down the grid. I think first of all, I think picking up on Johnny's point, Lando won't care that people are saying he's a mid world champion, all that kind of stuff. But I think if you actually go through the list of world champions, I think there are plenty that potentially fall into that category who are, right place at right time drivers, or just managed to get the rub of the green. But I don't think that's Lando's case at all this season. I think he's proven that he's been the most consistent. He's been probably the most consistent driver. Maybe Max, you could say, has also been just as consistent. I think Lando's done it in a way where he's very different from a Max or previous world champions. That he very much wears his heart on his sleeve. He's not afraid to say how he's feeling in terms of how he's going mentally in the media, which many could consider to be weak. You shouldn't expose that, but he's done it his way. I think. I think that run he's had sort of post Austria, perhaps you know, it was very much Oscar's first half of the season, and then Lando's really sort of sorted himself out. He was making errors in qualifying. He'd sort of eradicated that, and he's just done exactly what he needed to do. And yet, it ended up, from 104 points, he ended up with ahead of Max. He's ended up with a 2-point win. But when you look at the record books, none of the world champions say world champion by 100 points or by 300 points. They just say world champion. So he's not going to care.
Yeah, I think you just have to look at the mental resolve of, especially after the Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort,
Mm.
when I forget which issue, when he had to park up on the side, and in an era or season, sorry, where cars have been particularly reliable as well, to have that could have been at the time a massive game changer. Luckily for him, for Lando Norris, sorry, there was a lot of races still to go, but it could easily a driver could easily semi throw in the towel at that stage. You'd be so despondent. But yeah, the mental resolve to kind of fight back and to eradicate some of those errors that Lando Norris is making early in the season as well. Starts especially have always been a bit of a bug for Lando Norris in the past, but he seems to have improved, and I'm sure he'll find more areas to improve in terms of the first, second launches, etc. Yeah, just a mental resolve to come back and keep going to the end, even after the double DQ as well towards the end of the season, when it got really close and you can really feel the Verstappen's breath on the rear wing. Yeah, I just think the mental resolve to keep going to the end, the last lap, last corner. Yeah, just proves that he is deserving of it at the end. I think it was mentioned by one of the two of you. Again, he's not going to care one jot about what is written on social media or what is said by experts. He has that title wrapped up in the history books.
Yeah, I think whichever of the three had won it at the end of the day, the table doesn't lie. It's the same in football. Johnny and I, obviously, we know a lot working in football. It's like the table doesn't lie. It's very unusual if the table does lie. In a way, I would say you can't be a generational champion every year either. You can't always have a generational champion in F1. He's won his first. We don't know. He might win the next 5. Then we're talking about a generational champion again. But it's his first one. That's all he can get. You've got to get over the line on that first one. There were many moments. We talked about the Antonelli overtake at the end of Qatar, but there were a whole load of moments for Piastri, for Norris, and for Verstappen across the course of the season, which either sort of significantly increased their chances of winning or decreased their chances of winning, often through no fault of their own. And I think actually it doesn't really stack up that Norris is undeserving. I think when you look at those, Norris has had as much bad luck as anyone. The retirement that you mentioned in Zandvoort, where he really I think that actually benefited him, that it was like a huge setback to his chances, but it wasn't his fault. And I think that made a big difference. If he'd have messed it up, if he'd have put it in the wall in Sandford, I wonder if we'd be seeing a different Norris now. But because it wasn't his fault, it seemed to like release a weight from him a little bit. Like, I'm basically out of contention. In his head, he's probably like, I'm sort of out of contention. I've got a long way left to try and put it right. It wasn't my problem. It wasn't my fault in the first place. And then he seemed to race with a bit more freedom after that. And obviously there was that sort of front end setup change that McLaren found that apparently suited Norris, helped get it to sort of his driving style. That was a massive bonus. But to like just switch it over to Piastri, I wasn't surprised at all that Piastri was leading at the early parts of this championship. I thought last year, actually, that might have been Norris's year. Like, they had the dominant car, they won the constructors title, and if Norris had been a little bit cleaner, maybe a little bit racier, I think he could have kind of given Verstappen a bloody nose and actually won that title. But he didn't. And I thought, okay, Piastri's like young, very inexperienced last year. He's going to take a big step forward this year, and I think Norris might have his hands full. And it almost proved to be the case. So I feel bad for Piastri, but I'm also a bit disappointed in Piastri that when things sort of started going against him, he did sort of seem to like drop off quite alarmingly. Very few podiums with that car towards the end of the season. He's praised for sort of staying so calm and cool, because he doesn't really, he doesn't shout, he doesn't like get angry about stuff. He's always a very like level-headed character. But then that sort of narrative doesn't really hold up if you remain level-headed, but your results drop off, I think.
I think the point of that drop off, and it was a significant drop off by his standards set by the first half of the season, was probably at Monza. They ended up having to invert the positions again, didn't they?
Huge talking point. Yeah, definitely worth bringing that up. Yeah,
and I think psychologically for Oscar Piastri at that stage, it was a bigger blow than it was made out even in the media, because I don't know where you guys sit on this, but for me, I'm probably more in the Piastri camp in the sense that slow and botched pit stops are all part of racing. And it happens, unfortunately, as much training as I know the guys and girls do for pit stops throughout the week in the factories. It happens, and it's part of racing. So, yeah, I'm probably more in the Oscar camp in that regard. And for me, that was probably the turning point and the moment where the momentum and pendulum started to swing the other way.
Yeah, I guess they're picking up on the Monza bit. That's sort of the one bit of sort of papaya rules that this year that did frustrate me, even with my Lando hat on. To be honest, I mean, yeah, like a slow pit stop's a slow pit stop, and I think even Max said it on the radio at the time. Like, what, they're swapping the positions because he had a rubbish pit stop. Like, how is that Oscar's fault? So yeah, I think that might have affected Oscar quite a lot. And then obviously, the big one is of course Baku as well, where it was just a horrible, weekend. You got I remember watching that and then looking when the first grid comes up on the coverage, and thinking there must have been a mistake that Oscar was somewhere like P17 after 2 corners, and then looking at the restart, he'd basically sort of more or less stalled the car like he used to see back in the day, when cars would just get stuck on the grid. But from having an absolutely dreadful start, putting the anti-stall in, and then sort of bidding it a few corners later, really, that was a weekend where sort of the sort of Oscar Iceman sort of shade just began to drop a bit as well. And from then, I think his lack of podiums and sort of race pace was surprising that he dropped it. But then you sort of also have to remember that he is also only in his 3rd year of Formula One. So I think, even though he was leading for a good amount of time, I think this season would have done him an absolute world of good in terms of, he now knows how to fight for a championship and what it takes, and what he needs to do better. And I think if you just said to him, when he signed his contract with Alpine, that 3.5 years later he'd be fighting for world championship, I think he would have snapped your hand off.
Yeah, he's been nothing but impressive in his very, fledgling F1 career still. It was a big chance missed. That will take some digesting for Oscar Piastri this year. My hope for him and for McLaren in general is that, like, after the regulation changes, which we'll mention in a sec, like, the McLaren if it drops off now, that's also going to be another big thing for him to digest. Like, I had a shot at the title last year, I didn't grasp it. If the McLaren is like,
Yeah.
let's just say it's the fourth fastest car next year, might not be the case, probably won't be the case, but if it is, then that's horrible. I remember that, like, so my hat would be a Felipe Massa hat, and I remember like after Massa went so close to the title, then the Ferrari was just like horribly uncompetitive for the next couple of years, and that was sort of when Massa was at his peak. Then before obviously he had the accident at Hungary, that sort of life-changing accident. But yeah, I remember that. That must be a thing as well. You know, when you've been right on the competitive edge, and then you're not anymore. You know, when you've let that chance go, it sort of, it's going to play on your mind more. Let's move on to the next of our top three, though. Obviously, Max Verstappen finished second, won a whole load of Grand Prix, won more Grand Prix than anybody else this season. Has he had his best year in F1 without winning the title, perhaps?
He might well have done. I actually very much listen to the P1 podcast very, very regularly, almost every episode. And Tommy on there is a huge Max fan, and he actually said this has been his favourite season following Max, even though he didn't win the title. Because I think Max has really, this is anyone who was in the camp of, you know, Max is good because the Red Bull is good, you know, just needs to rewatch this season. Even as going back as far as Japan, that weekend he had in Suzuka, where, you know, that Red Bull at the start of the season was not competitive at all, and he was just absolutely incredible and, you know, left everybody for dead. And then, you know, to claw back 102 points in whatever, how many races we had after the summer break, just shows that, you know, you give this guy an even remotely competitive car, and he is going to be there or thereabouts. I think apart from obviously the red mist in Spain, and he had that spin after the restart in that safety car restart in Silverstone. Apart from that, it's a pretty flawless race. You know, 24 races in terms of making mistakes. He just doesn't make them, and I think that's what makes him so hard to beat and so competitive.
Yeah, I think you just have to look at the constructors' standings at the end of the season as well. When you see Red Bull, okay, fine, McLaren's romped away with it with however many 100 points they've got. There's still a few 100 points to Mercedes, who finished second. But when you consider the gap, I don't know the points exactly, but the gaps between Mercedes and Red Bull in third, you got to consider that as a team. Their points generated by one driver, essentially. And he's been doing that not just for this season, but he's been doing that consistently over time. And I've had my grievances with Max Verstappen, not personally, of course, after Abu Dhabi 2021. Not against him personally, like I said, but just from a sporting spectacle with my Mercedes hat on, of course. But I finally got over that, I think. Yeah, I think it's difficult to ignore the quality he has and the way he just pulls that team, having had X amount of teammates over the years as well. Okay, you can argue the car is designed for him and purely for his driving style, but yeah, we talked about consistency over one season from Lando Norris, but consistency over seasons, many years is a true test of is a true true indication of world class quality.
Yeah, this is a guy absolutely operating at the top of his game. Took it down to the final day, came close, lost by 2 points, of course. I think it was right to mention, though, you know, the red mist, the hit on Russell at Barcelona, actually, because, and I don't want to just focus in on that moment, but I think it just shows that, yeah, because Norris won by 2 points, there's people sort of picking everything apart online, saying, oh, Piastri would have won if it wasn't for X, or Norris wouldn't have won if this hadn't happened, or Verstappen should have won because Norris got that luck here or there or whatever. There's so many little moments that make up who is the title winner at the end of the day. And like, yeah, you could also say Verstappen didn't win because he got red mist in Barcelona and lost, like 10 points. All of these things are sort of equally true / not true. You know, it doesn't make, it doesn't, it's not fair to only look at one of those points, whether that's sort of put for or against your favourite driver. It's not fair to boil it down to one thing, and that seems to be what everyone's doing online, saying like, this is what should have happened if only it wasn't for that. It's like, that's the whole season. It's like, 20 plus races worth of stuff boiled down into like some point standings at the end of the day, and you can't take the season without these moments. You can't pick and choose these moments, because otherwise it wouldn't be live sport, would it?
No,
You
I
even
think
go as far. Sorry, Sam. After you.
no. I was just going to say, as Max very eloquently put it, I think it was last season. It's all if, and if my mum had balls, she'd be my dad. So
That's probably one of my favourites. Favourite quotes come out F1 in the last few years. But no, just to add more fuel to that single incident bonfire, I guess. If you can go right back to the first race of the season in Australia, I know the elements kicked in, of course, but Piastri was the unfortunate McLaren. And yeah, I think that's just the beauty of sport. Teams and individuals are going to trip up over 24 races. I guess yes, is who stands on the top at the end of it. That that goes down in history books. And what matters.
I'll try and rattle through some of these last sections as we sort of wrap up our feelings from this season just gone then. Sam, I'll come to you first. Best driver of the season? You just get one. You get one name. That's all you get.
oh, okay, best driver of the season. I'll tell you what. I'll go out. I'll go outside of the. I'll go outside of the top three. From the notes I've made, I'm actually going to do a shout out for Carlos Sainz. Because he had, I think he had a really tough start first
Operator.
half of the season. Yeah, he had a really, really tough start at Williams, and I think he was, I don't know, but he was probably feeling probably a bit hard done by being there in the first place because he's, he is a much, no disrespect to Williams, but from where they were last season, he is a much better driver than a seat in a Williams. But I just think this last half of the season, he has really shown his quality and also the potential that Williams have, going forward, especially with those Mercedes power units. And if they are as good as everyone is saying they are going to be, those power units for 2026, then I think, especially with James Vowles at the helm, I mean, I think he could probably sell me anything. I could listen to him all day. Um, he's just been amazing. I mean, it was a couple of podiums. If you think if he left Ferrari and Hamilton's left podiumless, and Sainz did he pick up two? Was it one or two by the end of the season? And so I'm going to go for Sainz, and just another shout out to Williams, who one stat I got, they scored 17 points last season, and this season they've scored 137, that's an astonishing uptake from a team who, again, as James Val said, do not care about 2025. I think watch out, Grid, for when they do care.
Cool, yeah, fifth place and just
Yeah,
one spot behind Ferrari as well, which
yeah,
must have been quite
yeah,
enjoyable for Sainz. I love
yeah,
that shout
yeah,
of Sainz. I do wonder if Sainz isn't ruining his decision ultimately to leave McLaren though. Although I know it was a long
yeah.
time ago, but then when McLaren suddenly become championship winners, he must have been thinking, "Oh man, Norris was my teammate. We were all comfortable there," and he probably feels he could have got the best of Norris. But love that shout, Johnny. Your best driver of the season?
Yeah, so I think with the science of McLaren, I think it's always a classic case of shoulda, woulda,
Mm,
coulda. And just to add to science, I'm going for a different driver as well. Sorry. I don't think enough attention is paid to a driver who switches teams and performs in a new car. I think with this season we've seen better drivers struggle in new environments, new setups, etc. But the fact Science has got that podium, at least we know he's got one, maybe a second somewhere down the line this season as well. I mean, it shows that he is adaptable. And big fan of Williams as well. Have to agree with that. Big fan of James Vowles. But the driver I will probably pick is haven't made notes actually, so I'm trying to work this out as we go. It's like Kimi Antonelli. Again, just on the subject, I know he's been part of the process in Mercedes, but just to pick up on the kid again, coming into coming into a big car big name car that has won championships over the last decade, to come in and perform, to I guess get the most out of that Mercedes that he could. I know he finished quite significantly behind Russell eventually by the end of the season. But not just for the performance, but also the kind of mental resolve we mentioned earlier about having to face criticism, controversy, and okay, that was right at the end of the season, but still to bounce back from that. And also the so-called criticism as well from Toto Wolff. I think that was after Monza as well, where he is underperformed, or the performance was underwhelming. I forget the words exactly. Yeah, I mean, that could either you could either go into a show off after hearing something like that, or you can really kick on. And yeah, I think he did the latter. And yeah, having secured a podium in Canada as well early in the season, I think, yeah, for me, he's probably driver of the year, and obviously certainly one to look out for in the coming years.
Very nice, very nice. I think I'll actually sort of take that from the opposite perspective of the same team, and I'll go with George Russell as my driver of the year. I think there's some. I know we've talked about a lot about the top three, so this, maybe this is best of the rest. But I think George Russell, there's a case for him being driver of the year this season as well, because I think it happens regularly that there are drivers where you feel like if their car was competitive, the signs suggest that they would have won the World Championship this year. And I wonder, with the way things went at the other teams, like if that Mercedes was in the title fight, I think Russell had such a consistent season that he would have actually delivered. Like that's, of course, it's not quite the same pressure. Like I would say, like Ricardo has had a season like that in the past, where like if 2014, I think it was, where it's like if that Red Bull was title winning, he would have won that title. It's too easy to say that, but I think Russell had that year this year. No retirements, almost always top five. Couple of race wins, like you can't say fairer than that. This is a guy who's been a bit maligned as well for sort of not converting race winning chances. I don't really remember him like losing any good opportunities for points this year. I think Qatar maybe was one of his worst, and he just had one of those unlucky moments, but it was on lap one, and it meant he got sort of swallowed up by 2 or 3 cars and then couldn't get back into the top 5. But like ultimately he was like always there, and it still surprises me looking at the team standings. We just had them up, we were talking about Williams in 5th, which is excellent, but Mercedes was second. Like this is a Mercedes car that was like never in the fight. How are they second? I know there's answers to that with Red Bull being such a one car team. Ultimately, that's the real reason. But like Mercedes were second in the championship, and that is all down to the massive consistency of George Russell. And I think he basically didn't put a foot wrong this season, which is not really something you can say about almost anybody else.
Yeah, I think just picking up on Russell, I think he was the only driver. I think he completed every single lap bar 2 this season, which is when he finished 2 laps down in Monaco. After that, he whatever the alternate strategy he tried there. So I think that just, yeah, like you said, Tom, just points to his incredible consistency. And I think he is definitely one of those drivers that, if Mercedes are, as we think, and going to be back towards, the front, much more close to the front of the grid next season, I think watch out for George Russell.
Yeah, he stepped into team leader role really, really nicely. Jonny, you wanted to weigh in on the Mercedes issue?
Well, no, I was just about to say exactly that. Just with my Mercedes hat on, just to complete the Mercedes set, I guess. Give some praise to both the guys. But no, I think he really did step up this season. I mean, George Russell, when I see him in interviews, I think he always talks very eloquently. Yeah, I get a good impression that he was looking to take that next step the last season. And yeah, with Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari, of course, that gave him the perfect space to move into and to assume more leadership responsibility. And I think he has delivered that on the track, especially.
Switching it over then, Sam, biggest disappointment of the season?
Oh yeah, I've got a few here. I'll tell you what, I'll leave Lewis Hamilton for somebody else, because that's the most obvious one. I'll leave that for somebody else. I'm just going to go, rather than a driver, I'm going to go with a team and just say Alpine. Just so disappointing. They were looking promising in pre-season testing, but since then, like just not competitive at all. I felt incredibly sorry for Jack Doohan. He stood absolutely no chance of staying in that seat whatsoever. Obviously, didn't help himself by sort of leaving his DRS open wherever it was, and absolutely having one of the crashes of the year. But then Colapinto has come in and really not been much better at all. And they've got a really talented driver there in Pierre Gasly, who I really like. But 22 points all season is just. I think if you'd said last season that Alpine were going to finish 50 points behind Sauber, you probably would have been checking what you'd put in your tea, because that is just that is just such a drop off. And and I think with obviously they're switching to Mercedes power units next year, when with Renault leaving the sport now altogether, which is a shame. I think there's going to be some big changes needed at Alpine for them to drag themselves back up the grid and become competitive again, because they were just a tractor all year this year, and just really really disappointing.
I think that's a good shout. There was a discussion online as to whether they are statistically the worst works team ever to enter in Formula One, which I think they were not. They were just saved by some others. But I think it was like Ferrari 1950 was worse.
Right. The first year of Formula One, yeah.
And I want to say like Zach Speed like 80, Zach Speed 82 maybe, Zach Speed 84. So it was like the fact that they're in that discussion for being the worst works team ever, that's gone under the radar a bit. I think that's a good shout. Jonny, what about you in terms of most disappointing this season?
I think I'll just pick up on the easy one, since I have no notes in front of me whatsoever. And I guess Team LH. I guess the question is what, why, how, all of them. I think you've just got to look at it from Lewis's perspective, especially that it's well documented that he's been wanting this drive, and he's been idolizing the team for such a long time, and to finally get it, and not just not get a podium, but to be in the to miss Q2 in the last 3 or 4 races, whatever it was, towards the end of the season, and then to be picking up these 8th places in Abu Dhabi and the scraps, as they're known, I guess. It's just not what anyone's used to, especially himself. I think myself personally, I think I was expecting kind of big things from the move, but clearly the car hasn't suited him. I guess next season is a bit of a lottery for anyone, and I guess the only hope is that A, he doesn't retire, which would be horrendous, I think, for the sports, and B, that the playing field is leveled out so much that Lewis can be fighting for wins, and not just in sprint races as well. To pick up an obvious one.
Yeah, no, absolutely fair enough. My one would be Yuki Tsunoda, and I have to, I have to be honest and put on my Yuki Tsunoda hat and say I'm a massive Yuki Tsunoda fanboy. So for me, it's like this is the most disappointing storyline, sort of, or development arc of the season. Obviously he's underperformed massively. I can't deny that. He's ultimately been near the back, but then also like the kind of his treatment as well. I feel like Red Bull hung him out to dry completely this year, like massively hung him out to dry. They're saying now like he had options, like some of the new teams were really interested. There was a lot of interest in signing him sort of at the beginning of the season, end of last season, maybe giving him an outshot, because obviously Red Bull, it seemed like the doors were going to be closing on him. And then they didn't let him negotiate then. They didn't let him speak to other teams. Apparently, obviously, if the media is to be believed, he was blocked from leaving or blocked from exploring other options for next season. Now it's too late. They let him go late on in the season. But also, he began really strongly. This is completely forgotten now. He began really strongly in that RB because the V-carb is like known as being like really nice to drive this year. Obviously, Adjar's come in and done amazingly well. Like really a very impressive season from Adjar. But I think Tsunoda was from the early running like on course to kind of match Adjar this season or be as good as him, which, that isn't necessarily the best thing ever, but it could have been a really strong team on like 2 counts this year. Lawson was like 20th in every session in the Red Bull. It's understandable they made the wrong call, but then they put Yuki in the kind of undrivable Red Bull, or the Max Verstappen only Red Bull. Obviously, he was going to struggle. Initially, he was in the top 10. There were improvements on what Lawson had brought with that car, but I think he was just left sort of without a chance. And I'm a bit bummed that he's been left like at the end of the season then without a drive as well. So that's my biggest disappointment, because I think there was a good Yuki Tsunoda season in there. If we're living in an alternate universe, there was a solid Yuki Tsunoda this season.
Yeah, I think just jumping in quickly on Yuki, especially with my, I've got 4 Kiwis in my house with my Lawson hat on, and going back to what we said at the start about drivers being in the right place at the right time. Lawson is just, he's done well since he's gone back to V-carb, but he has really got the luck of that switch. Because obviously, if he would have stayed in that Red Bull all year, he'd be most likely be the one now without a drive. So Yuki really did get a bit of a hospital pass there. And I think also if you went back to the end of 2024 and you were doing like a predictions of 2025, and you said the second Red Bull would finish P17 in the championship, I think you would have been, absolutely laughed out of, whatever F1 friendship group you're in, because, Checo finishing P8 last year was considered a bit of a disgrace. So 9 places lower, and just horrid, constant Q3 exits. Just shows that path Red Bull went down with, the car suiting Max really, they put all their eggs in that basket.
I think based on that, especially, I think all that's left to say is good luck, Isaac Hadjar. Because again, he's had a supremely strong season, especially again in Australia. What happened to him on the formation lap is very it could have been very easy for a rookie to fold after not even making the starting grid. But yeah, he's shown qualifying pace, which I think is underrated in a lot of drivers. Unfortunately, the racing balls, are they called now, hasn't always converted that into points in positions. But it's the next one in line for that poison chalice seat at Red Bull. So I'm intrigued to see how he will go next year.
Last few questions then in the last few minutes of this part of the podcast. Jonny, I'll hand it back to you straight away. One driver, best rookie of the year. Who stood out to you?
I can't say Antonelli now, can I? Because I've already mentioned.
You can. That's fine. If he's your favourite, then it would be the logical pick after you've picked him as your sort of driver of the season.
Yeah, try another name actually. I will go with Ollie Behrman because he's made a few errors, especially at Silverstone with the pit lane. But he's shown a lot of flashes of what he can do, and he's put that car in the top 10 in qualifying more times than a lot of people thought he would. And I don't know for the life of me how many points he got, but he's getting a lot out of that Haas, especially going against Esteban Ocon, a seasoned, well, considering the age of drivers nowadays, a seasoned pro in the industry. So yeah, again, like with Hadjar, I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table next year on a more level playing field in that Haas.
Sam, rookie of the year?
I was going to say Behrman as well, but I'll give a shout out to Hadjar because Hadjar was the one that when all the rookies were being announced, it was, there were big announcements and it was like, and Hadjar will race for VCARB. And we're like, a lot of people were like, who? Like, who's this guy who, he's been in F2 in the Red Bull Juniors program. No one really knew anything about him. Especially given, the start he had, in Australia. I mean, just that image of, Anthony Hamilton giving him a hug in the paddock, as he's bawling his eyes out, his dreams come true, and then he's binned it on the formation lap. Like, you can't even think what was going through his head. But he's just been incredibly exciting, incredibly consistent. He definitely deserves the promotion, and I just hope for him that next year he's going in at a good time with a regulation change where the cars are more even playing field. So hopefully he can be a lot closer to Max than say Checo or Lawson or Yuki have in the past.
Yeah, you've pinched my one as well. Then I would have gone Hadjar from Behrman top to Hadjar. Just we've already gone over the reasons. He ended Yuki Tsunoda's career. He's dominated Lawson in that car. And I'm glad you mentioned that moment in Australia with Anthony Hamilton as well. If you don't remember that, it was like Hamilton's father giving him a hug, consoling him after the formation lap spin. The cameras caught that and stayed on it, because that brings me on to the next topic, which is sort of favourite moments of the season. Now, this can be any kind of flavour, like anything that's happened. A favourite moment of the season. I absolutely know what mine is. Who's got one? I don't want to put you on the spot if you need to rack your brains. But Jonny,
go on.
I'll go over to you first if you know your moment of the season.
I'm unfortunately probably pinching both of yours, but it has to be the Hulk. Has to be the podium finish after 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 races, however many he's finished in his long career, to finally do it. I know he's had some close shaves in the past. Brazil comes to mind, I think, a few years back. But Yeah, to finally do it at Silverstone, it has to be his head. For me, it's head and shoulders above anything else. Sorry if I pinched anyone else's.
I wasn't going to say Hulk because I was pretty sure that was going to be Tom's, but I'll leave that. I've got two very very quick ones. I've got from a purely racing incident, Lando's qualifying in Austria, where he pulled half a second on the field. In a lap that is 65 seconds to pull zero point 0.5 of a second in a qualifying session. That was a moment that really, when that time came up on the timing screen, you just went, wow, that's a serious racer right there. The other one, my other favorite one, was the Lego Grand Prix in Miami. Was just like I think for the first time since this set of regulations came in with these ground effect, cars, that there were drivers actually enjoying driving them or driving cars around a circuit. And just the amount of fun that was just really 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 fun to see them all very relaxed mucking about um, in some Lego cars as well. So I think let's go with Lego F1. I think maybe we should replace the sprints with Lego F1 for next year.
Very, very nice. I feel like I've been relegated down to this now, but I was going to say Hulk podium. He got a Lego trophy as well at that race, which is a bit of an underwhelming trophy if you've waited like 15 years for it. But let's go Racing Bull's social media team, responsible for my moment of the season with their with like they did like Peter Andre Mysterious Girl. like mimed by Hajar and Lawson, and it was so
Yeah,
stupid that it's just
very
coming
good.
into my mind now. So
Yeah,
there you go.
That.
That's my moment of the season, and the Hulk podium is a perfect place to segue onto. It's the end of Sauber, just things that are sort of going out at the end of this season. Sauber leaving the sport. You saw Peter Sauber kind of like looking up under the fireworks of Abu Dhabi. We've got Helmut Marko leaving Red Bull. That's massive. And we've got the regulation change, which we'll finish this part with. But any thoughts on any of that? Sauber, Marko, regulations, end of an era?
yeah. I mean, on Sauber, I'm stealing this completely from Ted Kravitz, but um, he made a very good point the other day that when Peter Sauber started Sauber in 1991-92, motorsport was illegal in Switzerland, and it was actually only legalized again in 2022. So, for a guy to go, oh, what's illegal in my country? Oh, a motorsport. Okay, I'll try and start a team that's going to get to the very, very top, and then stay there for so long. Is credit to Sauber. They've been part of sort of my F1 life. They've always been there. I think with them and Williams and obviously McLaren and Ferrari they've just always been there. But also, credit to them for this year as well. 4 points last season, four for Zhou Guanyu, zero for Bottas, and then 77 points this season, which no one was expecting. I think obviously Jonathan Wheatley's gone there from Red Bull, and he's really whipped that team into shape. And I think they're actually in a really good standing point now to become, as they become Audi and look to the future. But yeah, sad to see Sauber go. And you'll be fondly remembered.
Yeah, sad to see them go. Excited as well to see what comes next season. But with Sauber, don't, I think you just said it, Sam. It's all part of especially our generation, our upbringing, and that Kubica win, Canada. I want to say Canada.
Yeah, it was Canada
Yeah,
2009.
yeah,
I have to admit to not having the best memory and but yeah, it always does stand out, and that could potentially have been one of their only wins ever as well. Yeah, it certainly has a place in my memory bank. Yeah, as I said, excited to see how the evolution takes place next season.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite teams as well. Growing up, like the sort of early years of Sauber, the sort of Frenzens, and then they sort of gave the seat to a little known Kimi Raikkonen. Who's
mm.
like, I think he'd raced like 12 single-seater races at the time when he got his first drive with Sauber. Like Massa came up through there. I loved Sauber. I will be sad to see them go. I was glad that they sort of hung on through the difficult years. That's cool. Good that you mentioned Jonathan Wheatley actually though as well, because we've been seeing a lot of pictures of Jonathan Wheatley, like the old Red Bull lineup, like the Horner, Jonathan Wheatley, some of the old drivers maybe that are obviously more realistically not going to be there for many years. But like Newey's gone, Wheatley's gone, Horner's gone, and now Helmut Marko's gone as well. What are your thoughts on the kind of behind the scenes goings on at Red Bull? Obviously Horner left halfway through the season. Lauren Mickey has come in and essentially has done pretty well for the guy with the most extra small t-shirt in Formula One. By the way, he looks so slim, and I always worry for him when I see him on camera. It's like, dude, you got an amazing hospitality garage. Please go and eat some of the food that's in there. But hopefully he's fine. He's just a thin guy. That's all right. I am as well. But Marco's gone. What's this going to all do to Red Bull? This kind of big shift behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think Red Bull are going to be the most interesting team to keep an eye on for next season. Like you said, there's been just a raft of high-profile people leave, and fair play to Lauren Mecky's coming in midway through the season. I think he's actually done a fantastic job. But there's talk of GP moving up into a higher role, which would mean a new race engineer for Max. Is there another engineer who can manage Max on track? Let's see. But I think the big thing's going to be is going to be Max next season, because if Red Bull and Ford don't get this engine right in 2026, I can't see Max being there in 2027. He's already made it quite clear that if this new version of Formula One isn't exciting, he'll go and do something else. He's got plenty else to do, in his life with his sim racing and family life. He's quite happy to move on. But if he does decide that he's in maybe the fifth or sixth fastest car, and that's not what he wants to do, but he still wants to stay in Formula One, then wow, that is going to cause carnage up and down the grid, because you'd think Toto is going to be all in on him. Aston Martin are going to be throwing any kind of money that they would want at him, and it's just going to cause another huge shake-up on the grid. So
no, Aston Martin won't, mate. Aston Martin won't do it, because it's going to make Stroll look bad if you've got Stroll next to Verstappen. So you can't do that.
Well, I don't know.
Anyone but Aston Martin.
Anyone but Aston Martin. Speak quickly on Aston Martin. I did think I heard the other day that Stroll is actually the fifth highest paid driver on the grid. He's won more than Piastri, apparently. So, but make of that what you will. But yeah, I think all eyes on Red Bull for next season. I think they're going to be really, really interesting to see how they come out of the blocks with these new regulations.
Yeah, I just have this feeling like they're as a non-manufacturer, obviously they are a big manufacturer with Red Bull Racing Technologies and stuff, but they're not like a car company per se. I just wonder that there seems to be like a power struggle. There was a power struggle with Horner and Marco and the sort of Austrian ownership and stuff. Things seem to be sort of changing quite seismically behind the scenes in terms of the way the business is being run in the sporting sense. And I do wonder as well, if they do fall down out of competitiveness, I don't think it's like outside the realms of possibility that they would just sort of announce that they're just going to leave the sport as well. I'm not saying it's going to happen like now, but I can imagine in 5 years' time they might not be in Formula One, and that's always the case. Ferrari are going to be there, McLaren are going to be there, but I'm not 100% sure that I can say that Red Bull will be if this doesn't sort of work out. If they're not, they were always on this path to the top. Now they've got there. If they're on a sort of trajectory downwards, I don't know. They've ridden it out once before, but I can't guarantee it. I don't know what's going to happen there. But yeah, as you say, very interesting.
You've got to say that with all the championships they've had, success in the last decade and a half or so, they've set their expectations extremely high, and they don't demand anything but winning and perfection. And with Cadillac coming in, I think that the landscape of the sport constantly changes. And I agree with you. It wouldn't surprise me if you saw a Red Bull team leave that was underperforming, especially going into this new big shift in regulations as well. And yeah, with Helmut Marko, another big figure leaving. First of all, before I say it, I don't agree with a lot of the things he says, but I do think there is value in having opinion in sport and having not necessarily an outspoken person, but just opinion, especially with the media controlled way sport is nowadays. So yeah, I guess we'll be waking up to less headlines maybe in German or English media as well. So, But yeah, again, to agree with Sam as well, I think Red Bull are definitely worth keeping an eye on next season.
Yeah, we've had this season. Everything's so close. We've completely got used to this now. I saw a clip from the other day that was posted. It was like a clip of Prost driving around Monza in like 2000, I don't know, 2 or something. And it was like 1.9 seconds off the pace was 13th place in that particular session at that point. And I was thinking, like we're so used to the fact now that like 6-7 tenths is like a massive margin. You could be like 6 tenths down and be so far away from the top. That's what's it squeezed the midfield super tight. We've got no teams anymore. Like as much as I loved Minardi, I definitely went to a lot of British Grand Prix where Minardi were like 4 seconds slower than most of the other cars and stuff. It's like we don't have that anymore. And this season's been great. Last season we had so many different winners. This season still quite a few different winners. A really tightly packed field. The last thing we want now is a is a massive overhaul in regulations, isn't it? I mean, I know there are reasons for it, but what have you guys heard about 2026 cars, and what are your thoughts on this like massive incoming change that may shake up everything after a couple of kind of interesting years?
Yeah, I guess these kind of last years have been interesting, but I think that the lack of being able to follow and overtaking has been frustrating, even with DRS. Like you saw in Qatar, with Lando trying to chase down Kimi, that even though he had DRS and a faster car, just the dirty air that's given off this generation of cars just makes it really really hard to follow. So I think it's probably time. I think the cars are probably a bit too big, as well. That I know they are reducing the sizes, which is good. Especially somewhere like Monaco. Like if you want to keep that on the calendar, you're not going to be able to change the track, so you've probably got to change the cars if you want to keep places like that, and maybe places like Singapore as well. But I think it's going to be a huge shake-up because it's a completely different style of driving. You've got things like battery harvesting you've got to do. You're having this basically like this power boost button that's DRS, to give you an extra push for of hybrid power. So I think it's going to be a lot of work for the drivers. I think over the winter to get used to these cars. And yeah, we will probably see a much more spread out field, like from qualifying. I think it's natural at the end of a regulation set that the cars do bunch up. I think that's natural. But so I think we probably will see, there might be more consistently 2-3 tenths between P1 and P2, for example, rather than the thousands sometimes we've seen of a second. But I think it's exciting, and it's great to see another team on the grid as well, because I think 10 is 12 is my happy place. But we're almost there. We're almost there with 11. So yeah, I think more drivers on the grid, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, and who gets it right, because there could be one team like we saw with Red Bull at the start of these regulations that absolutely nail it, and everyone's in their way can play and catch up. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think getting it right is the key, is the main thing, main takeaway. I think when you asked earlier, Tom, about disappointments of the season, at the back of my head, I was actually going to say some of the racing, if not most of the
Mm.
racing this year, because um, yeah, with the DRS, when it came in, it's like, oh, great, we've got this new way of making racing more entertaining, more overtakes, etc. But I think over time, with the development of the cars, it's just become too predictable. You see a long straight, you've got Hungary, for example, the main straight there. You've got Las Vegas, I think, where the cars hit 200 plus miles an hour. Any long straight you can pick out of any track in the season. Baku, for example, you know, DRS going to be open. Someone's probably going to try and sling it in, and it's too predictable. So that's why I was going to say the racing. And I think with the new regulations, I'm trying to remember the breadcrumbs I've picked up over the season about them, but I just think it'll just add a bit more unpredictability to the racing. I believe that the MGUK units will play a bigger role, for example. So I guess you could see drivers maybe lifting and coasting more, which kind of opens the door for, I think I mentioned the power boost, that kind of NOS button that drivers will have next year.
Yeah.
if someone is playing a different strategy or trying to fiddle with a button, there's probably more on the wheel next year. Someone could easily send it into a 200-meter corner, for example. So I think which could lead to more incident as well, more penalties. Stewards might be busier as well. So yeah, I think as well, completely agree. Having another car on the grid and another team on the grid, sorry, would just make those first corners a lot more busier overall, and potential for more jeopardy and incident as well.
Yeah, I think the gist of what I heard was like 30 centimeters smaller, slightly shorter, slightly lighter, but not enough. Some of the drivers are saying wish they were a bit smaller and lighter, but still slightly smaller, slightly lighter, sustainable fuels. The design concept to be sort of much less dirty air, much sort of smoother looking cars that don't kick up this turbulence. What else have you got? Like, movable front wings. I think they've got like some
movable front
electronic
and rear wings. I think movable front and rear wings. Yeah.
and then generally, excuse me, generally like simpler technology, so it's a bit less less costly, basically.
Yeah, I think with the front wings would be the part that probably interests me most. And I think we have an expert who's just moved up a role in Aston Martin as well in aerodynamics, of course. So just a little hint into my brain, a team to watch out for potentially next season. But I think with a lot of the tracks this year, and especially the way the cars have developed and evolved over this era, the current era just gone, sorry, a lot of cars have been track dependent. Whether it's higher downforce, low downforce, for example, undulation, which like Brazil, which changes the way drivers prefer stable rear ends, or I guess if you're Max Verstappen, like a heavy kind of front end maybe. But I guess these kind of, I don't know exactly how they work, but if they're able to change the aerodynamic flow, I guess that could help cars become a bit more all-rounded throughout the season, as opposed to picking here and there. For example, the McLaren's always going to be strong in the last three races of the season. I think it could just level out the playing field even more in that regard as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I forgot, in the tightness of the championship battle, I kind of forgot that, actually, if you even look at the last three races that we talked about, there's sort of no overtakes virtually in any of those. That's why the Antonelli one stood out so much. I sort of focus on the championship overall, and I love having drivers from different teams where they're close competing. But actually the racing in general, it has left something to be desired. So there's a lot to look forward to in 2026. There's a lot to look forward to in the second part of this episode as well. We'll call it a day for now. We'll take a break, and we'll have another pod talking about the sweepstake F1, the reason that we're here, three of us, this international group that we're talking about, all of us playing the sweepstake game. I'm going to bail myself out and say I did what some of these teams have done, talking about the 2026 regulations, and I gave up halfway through this season, or even a quarter of the way through the season. I've been focusing on 2026, guys. So watch out for me over the winter.
Even earlier, so don't worry.
Yeah, I know you were pushing all the way to the end, Sam, but I gave up. I was focusing on next year. In seriousness, as a last point, which teams did come out and sort of publicly say they have not been pushing this season? Who came out and was like, look, we're focusing on next year? Because a few of them have, more than usual, said that this year, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, Williams said it quite early on, probably after they've bought one or two rounds of upgrades, and then they said that's pretty much going to be it. They're the ones that really stand out. Alpine, I think Aston Martin to an extent as well. They didn't bring out a lot of upgrades past sort of maybe round 10. There wasn't a huge amount going their way either. So I think I think once they knew, then they're not going to be hugely competitive. I mean, it makes sense. You may as well, you put your eggs into next year's basket, and and put your focus there. So maybe those are the teams to watch out for. But let's see.
Yeah, I don't remember any headlines being made per se, but I just think from performance on the track, especially in the second half of the season, I think you're looking at the Alpine, especially. You're looking at even Sauber to some extent, and I think the teams like Ferrari, although they underperformed, I think they're still having to push as a reputation, as a brand. But yeah, especially Alpine and Sauber come to mind as teams who kind of changed their gaze to 2026 earlier than others, let's say.
Yeah, maybe a shake-up in that very, very tight midfield battle for next year. Plenty for us to sort of keep an eye on over the winter as well. And these winter breaks are much shorter now than they used to be as well. With the season finishing in December, it'll be like coming around in about 6 weeks' time. We'll start to see the first track time and stuff.
I think we've got car launches in January. So, and I think it was only, from Monday after Abu Dhabi, I think it was 89 days until lights out in Melbourne. So that's really not much time at all.
You just reminded me of that massive car launch extravaganza thing.
I think that's going to be. I think that's going to be a permanent fixture. I think that and they had Jack Whitehall roasting people, didn't they? And I can't remember who. There was someone performing, but as long as it's better, as long as it's better than the World Cup draw, I will take it.
Yes. With that, we'll round it up here. Jonny, Sam, it's been fantastic sort of getting it all out, talking about the 2025 season with you both. So much to sort of discuss there, so much fat to chew from this season. And I look forward to getting together with you guys again and talking about the F1 sweepstakes season that we've had as well. Anyone who is watching this, presume that you're going to know us, basically. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening if you've listened. If you've made it this far, then you're an absolute trooper. It's like the season with the mechanics having to go away for week after week after week. You've got through this. You've got through this whole thing. It's been great having you here with us. If you do want to get involved in the F1 sweepstake, you probably know one of us. Give us an email, give us a text, and you too can join the grid of fun. We've got a lot of constructors in this now. It's been a fantastic year, and we'll be back again soon.
Go. Wonderful. Cheers, Tom. Cheers, Jonny.
Cheers, guys.
Lando, this is Zach from McLaren. Is this the World Champion hotline? Yeah. You did it! You did it! Awesome!